it's been quite striking to witness the changes that have happened over the last 15 years. As I sort of foresaw a lot of these things, I was talking even in 2008 and 2009 about how the information battle space was going to overtake the physical battle space. That has come to pass. I figured that misinformation and disinformation would become more significant of a driver of discourse and sort of the sort of politic that that occurs in in a more globalized space. That has come to pass.
All right, Chelsea, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Welcome to London.
Love to be here.
We gave you a bit of British weather this morning.
Yes, it's actually it's funny because in New York we just had a bitterly cold week. The entire week was extremely cold, and y'all were having a fantastic week. And I came over here, and then we essentially flipped. So now it's a bitterly cold week here. And
this isn't that cold.
It's bitterly cold compared to the rest of March, and it's certainly last week.
We will rain on you a lot. But anyway, listen, look, it's great to see you. Big fan.
Great to be here.
Got lots of questions. We're in kind of weird times at the moment.
Are we?
I think we're in really weird times. Really weird times. We have a new administration, a repeat administration that's had a 4-year gap with a lot of strong support behind what they're doing. And I'm sat here thinking, are there things we should be skeptical about? But
sure.
It appears with Doge and the work Kash Patel, they're exposing some things. And so to talk to you about it is fascinating because obviously everything you've been through, I really want to know what your read on this administration is.
Okay. So, America is kind of in a garbage fire situation, just generally.
Yeah.
And I said this during the first administration, which is, there was all this talk and all this discussion about, Donald Trump is unusual or he is an aberration in politics. And I was skeptical of that. I thought, he's the inevitability of American politics. People have often said that Donald Trump is not what America is. Yet, if you ask anybody from outside of America, Donald Trump is probably the most American president we've ever had. Especially, maybe alongside like Teddy Roosevelt in terms of like branding and style and populist and sort of the populist retail politics approach. He is the normal that America has had, but with a little less of the sort of like uptight veneer that came within the sort of the mid 20th century of what the presidency became. He's sort of going back to the populist early 20th century sort of late 19th, early 20th century, like Robert Barron era, essentially kind of president in style and aesthetic. Which is what really resonates with voters at the end of the day. It's a vibe, American voters are vibes based. And he appeals to that. So I think that what we're seeing in the United States, though, at this particular time, is a lot of skepticism of institutions, valid in some cases, invalid in others, but it's very difficult for people to suss anything out because we have so much misinformation, we have so much disinformation, and everybody's out to try to get a buck. Everybody's trying to, get that step ahead. And it's because, the economy is suffering. There is a lot of grift. There's a lot of attempts at trying to squeeze out the smallest amounts of money out of people. And we just spent the last 3 or 4 years, essentially in an inflationary spiral where everything's getting more and more expensive. Egg prices were already starting to go up before Trump came in. So it's the decoupling of spending power from actual purchasing power.
Yeah,
like the decoupling of sort of the dollar from the dollar going up, but it being not able to spend, you can't buy as much.
Yeah, well, that's why we all buy Bitcoin.
Right.
Try and avoid that pressure. But you talk about there the loss of trust in institutions, some valid, some invalid. Where is it valid and where is it invalid? Where do you sit?
Well, it's hard for people to suss it out,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody is so tired of trying to like do critical analysis, right? Or and try to think critically. It's because it's hard. It requires work. It requires effort. And a lot of people they're tuning out because there's such a deluge of information. We live in a time that is interesting because I often get asked about secrecy versus transparency. Because of the events of 2010 and my subsequent imprisonment. But we're not in that time anymore because nothing is really secret anymore. Nothing's really hidden anymore. Everybody can see it. We are in the age of radical transparency. But the issue is that what has come with that is that now we see so much information. We have such a difficult time sussing out what is real, what is not real, what is important, what is not important. And that exhaustion hits the consumer extremely hard, and it's just easier to go with what feels like what sounds right, and that tends to play towards people's cognitive biases, the things that they already believe. So you get to pick and now that you have 200 different interpretations of something instead of 10, you get to pick and choose the reality that you want to believe in. And from the comfort of your own home and from the comfort of swiping on your own glass screen, you get to do that. But that isn't necessarily what's best for being a citizen and being an engaged person, in my opinion. But I understand that it's really hard. It's really hard because nobody wants to. Everything is TLDR now. Everything is TLDR. Like nobody wants to read 40 pages of a paper written by an academic right now. And we used to be able to have sort of a voice for what kind of things are sort of serious and peer reviewed. And we had only in the United States we had like 3 major television networks. Then we went to cable TV where we have an option of 200. Now we have YouTube and TikTok, and now you have 200,000 to 300,000 different interpretations of something. And so the thing that sells the best and that gets the most views, that gets the most clicks, that gets the most engagement is the thing that is going to hit that part of your gut that says, yeah, I believe that. I think that too. And I get that.
It makes this job really hard.
Yes.
Because you have ideological groups who will follow the show. And if you start challenging what may be their ideology, you get attacked, you get criticized.
Sure.
Even when you're just trying to find out, like, what's the truth of this situation?
Right.
And a lot of people have picked a side. Like, I often look at, say, a Trump decision. Say Trump's approach at the moment to Ukraine, Russia. And there's this narrative now that Zelensky is corrupt. Well, there is corruption there, I know. But Zelensky is corrupt. He's the problem. Very little criticism of Putin. And there's a cheerleading force behind that. But I just ran through the thought process. If Trump had come out hard against Putin and supporting Zelensky, would that same cheerleading force have cheerleaded the same? Would they have just followed exactly what he said? Are we looking for this kind of messiah?
Well, these are really large and very huge geopolitical issues, and it's being played for television at this point. So you have a retail. What we're seeing now is a retail politics approach to geopolitics, which is dangerous, in my opinion. I don't think that that's the right approach. Dressing somebody down for national television I don't think a good approach for diplomacy. I don't think it's a good approach towards building confidence. I don't think it's a good approach towards geopolitical respect, between nation states and heads of state. But also you have a lot of saber rattling that's been going on from from this administration, but you also had saber rattling coming from the other administration, but it's sort of flipping between the different directions and the different scripts. But at the end of the day, this is like really serious stuff. It's very dangerous, and it's having an impact on people. There are trenches in Ukraine. There are in eastern Ukraine. There are trenches in which people have been fighting and having drone attacks for to where, several, I think a couple 100,000 people have died at this point. So and it's essentially been a stalemate for over 2 years. I mean, this is a modern trench stalemate akin to the First World War at this stage.
Do you think what happened back in 2010, if it happened now, if you were facing the same kind of decisions, it would be easier for you now?
From a technical perspective, easier because we have the technology now. The events of 2010 occurred largely because the new tools of the internet and encryption allowed someone like me to be able to to be able to have that amount of information and be able to share that amount of information to the broad world, to the broader public. But without the filtering of television or of a newspaper, even though I initially tried to go to the New York Times, Washington Post, and it was then an up and coming website, Politico, which is now viewed as now it's viewed as mainstream, but it was still a blog at the time. And those filters, I could bypass those filters in 2010, but that was impossible in the 1990s. It was impossible in the early 2000s. So the shifting of the information sharing landscape occurred around the end of the 2000s and into the 2010s. Now it's so easy to obtain information. And speaking about Ukraine, when the Russians initially invaded into Ukraine, I was struck by the fact that I, as a civilian, as an observer, had access to far more on the ground information on what was happening in Ukraine in 2022 than I did in 2010, being in a classified environment as an intelligence analyst, actively participating in combat operations in Iraq. Like, that's how much information we have now. We have 10 to 15 times. And so being able to filter all of that information out is a skill and a resource that is required you have to filter out through so much information now, and it takes skill. It takes critical analysis. It takes the ability to sift through and determine information. But when you're receiving 20 to 30 times more information, it's very hard to authenticate, which is why in the initial invasion, we had so much disinformation and so much misinformation being spread by both sides.
But back to my question, I follow what you're saying, but do you think you, as a whistleblower, would find it easier now because there's more of an environment where people want this transparency?
No, because that you have 20 to 30 times as much information, and everybody's trying to filter through that, and so everybody's claiming that their information is true, and everybody's too tired to sift through it. So I think that the value of it's made the value of real information go down in the general public. So it's actually harder now.
That's sad.
I mean, this is what I've been worried about. This is what I've been saying for about 2 to 3 years, and one of the reasons why I've decided to lower my ingest of information on a personal level, and focus on the things that I really want to know and really want to care about, and to really limit my own brain, and because I don't want my time to be Zuckerberg's time, to be Musk's time, to be Bezos's time. That's my time. I get to pick and choose whenever I want to engage with these platforms and with the information sources that I get. But I have the luxury now of being able to say, you know what? I think I'm going to go to the park.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. because the future depends on it.
Do you how do you reflect on 2010? Do you reflect at all with regret, or do you know you did a really important thing at that time?
Um, I don't think of the past very often.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm very educated in history, and I'm very fascinated by history. I'm not saying that we don't look towards the past, but I'm very forward thinking. So,
Okay.
when I'm around my friends, they're always asking me like, what do you think is going to happen? And that was my job.
Yeah.
So, being an analyst and thinking forward is very much my focus. But I do think that it's been quite striking to witness the changes that have happened over the last 15 years, as I sort of foresaw a lot of these things even then. I was talking even in 2008 and 2009 about how the information uh, battle space was going to overtake the physical battle space. That has come to pass, in which now state actors are trying to do this. I figured that misinformation and disinformation would become more significant of a driver of discourse and the and sort of the sort of politic that that occurs in in a more globalized space. That has come to pass. I think that the social media was still quirky. It was still fun, and people wanted to be on social media. And I sort of expected I sort of anticipated the McDonald'sization and the fast food nature of social media to sort of overtake our want to connect with each other and become just simply another commodified consumable where you're just sort of consuming, and you hit the button and you get the treat, hit the button, get the treat, hit the button, get the treat, So I think that those and sort of the dopamine hits and the incentive to do that for ad revenue and for time has happened. And so I think that, it's been striking to see sort of we had the pieces to untangle what was going to happen over the next 10 years. But people have there's a normalcy bias that people have, where people want to believe that things are the way that they have been, and they're going to continue that way, even though we're in a time of dramatic change. I mean, the amount of social change and social upheaval that the internet itself, not even including all the other things with that the internet is bringing in terms of data collection and analysis and everything else, just the ability to connect between one person and another directly worldwide has had impacts that make the printing press look like look like it was going from copper to bronze.
So you're seeing it as a large civilizational shift then that we're going through?
I think so, yes. And we're in the early stages.
And so if you were predicting these things before, what are the things now that you think most about that not only concern you, but also give you hope, maybe?
Sure. I believe fundamentally that I am an optimist, but we have a really rough time ahead of us. So I don't think that we're heading in a good direction in the immediate term. We're going to have to do a lot of introspection as a society globally, right? It's not just going to be like, oh, it's the United States, oh, it's Germany, oh, it's Britain, oh, it's Brazil. We're going to have to do a global introspection and figure out like how we're going to engage with our planet, how we're going to engage with each other, how we're going to engage with discourse, how we're going to engage with reality, because we're kind of learning that that in a virtual sense, in the virtual world, you don't have to abide by the same reality. And so we're gonna have to come to this reckoning. And I don't think that coming to that reckoning is gonna like happen in a way that is predictable. I don't think it's gonna happen in a way that is comfortable. I don't think it's going to happen in a way that is that doesn't lead to an enormous amount of pain and discomfort and um, tragedy. There's going to be a lot of tragedy. I think. I think I think that I think the 2020s and the early 2030s are going to be a time when we have to realize like there's only so much planet. There's only so much information that we can extract from people. There's only so much time that we can extract from people, and there's only so much of a world in which we can have a valueless society.
Okay, and when you think about that, do you think the pressures are going to come from how we decide to govern ourselves then?
In part,
because it seems like we've become a world that is become addicted to politics.
yes.
Everybody has a political view. A lot of people engage with politics, whether that's on a daily basis with the news or minute by minute on social media.
Yeah.
But everyone seems to be playing a part in politics now.
Yeah.
And you've got very strong opinions, loudly held. So is this mainly a governance issue, how we govern, and everything is downstream from that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I do think that governments of the 20th century have been evaporating in the 21st century. Like they've been continuing to exist and they've been continuing to try to function. And you could see that even in the 2000s that, there was sort of this hesitancy of like, oh, there's this internet thing. Is it serious? Is it, do we need to regulate it? Do we need to, and then all hell broke loose in the 2010s. And now we're grappling with that. And now, what is the role of the state in an age where the invisible boundaries are clearly invisible? States are interesting because the United States is a federal, sort of entity that has borders, but those borders, they're like if you go drive to Canada, if you go drive to the Canadian and American border, or you go drive to the American and the Mexican border, there isn't like a thing. Like you could put up a wall, but there's no natural barrier. There's nothing that's stopping birds from flying over, right? In the same way that the ocean is, right? So states have since the Peace of Westphalia been an artificial abstract concept. Everything was religion based, and especially in the sort of Western canon and in European history, the United States was Europe was very religion based and based on the sort of feudal structures. Like, oh, this is my lord, that's the castle that my lord works in. I am a peasant. I work for that guy, and he has soldiers, right? But there was a sort of commons in between. And then by the Peace of Westphalia, there were sort of borders and boundaries that were starting to form, and nations. You sort of saw this transition from the Holy Roman Empire to a unified Germany by the mid 19th century, right? During German reunification. And the first German reunification, or the first German unification. And as we've moved towards nation states and having borders everywhere, borders become extremely important. But borders don't exist in the electronic sense. And I think states have been trying to impose that. And, I said recently that the internet had a good run. 30 years was a good run for the internet. And I think as we transition toward the splinternet, which is this idea in which Brazil has its own internet and its own rules, the European Union has its own internet and its own rules, China has its own internet and its own rules, and increasingly now the United States has its own internet and its own rules and regulations. As we've moved towards the splinternet, that is a reaction to the fact that information flows so porously and so quickly, and this stuff spreads like wildfire so fast, especially when you add algorithms into the mix, that they're struggling, they're grabbing and they're latching on for dear life. And you've seen the liberal politics has become reactionary, just in the sense of they're trying to grasp and hold on to this image of a nation state, like an institution, like, oh, my institutions are under attack or whatever, that really were struggling, that are struggling and probably never really existed, but are especially struggling in a porous information environment. And so you've seen that that liberal institutions have been like wanting to like jump on that and say, we have to regulate this immediately because, they're just trying to hold on to that.
But it
to that
feels
relevance.
futile.
It is futile
Yeah.
ultimately. This is, and I think that this is, what we've been seeing with liberalism and reactionary politics that have risen out of the recent era is a reaction to the fact that we have porous information boundaries now. That the fact that whatever I say, whatever I can text somebody in Australia instantaneously and show them a photograph of something that just happened, that I just witnessed, then I just saw, and that can be shared and spread in Australia in seconds. So now that we're in this era, like the nation state that had control and had boundaries and borders and armies, both in the liberal sense and in the reactionary sense, are grasping to regain that. We need to defend our borders. We need to build up walls. We need to shut that out. That is a reaction to this like fear and this anxiety of what a truly globalized and flat, non-hierarchical world is. And that's how much of a threat the internet was to institutions and power.
It feels also like a lack of imagination because, I mean, I've lived through the internet. My son over there, he doesn't know a time of pre-internet. He doesn't know what the 80s and the 90s were like and the early noughties, which I think was a golden era. But we've seen these industries change. We've seen the music industry completely change.
Yes.
My CD collection is
I was a Napster user.
I was a Napster user.
Yeah.
I love Napster. Turned me off Metallica for a bit. But I witnessed that, and now we have Spotify. I have all my music here, and my CDs
Do
are
you?
worthless. Yeah.
Is it yours?
Well, no. That's a fair point. I still have my CDs. But then we've seen the media industry change. You talked about texting somebody in Australia. I can get my news from Australia.
Yeah.
I can go on Tinder and date somebody in Australia.
Yeah.
All the industries, private industries, have had to grapple with this, and they found a way. They've found new business models. But it feels like a lack of imagination from the state to grapple with this and accept it and modernize.
Yes.
I mean, even money's been modernized. I can send money to somebody in Australia with Bitcoin, and nobody can stop me.
Yeah.
And so it feels like it's the last institution, the last part of society that's managed to grapple with this.
Yes, I agree.
And so I guess what you're saying is everything we're witnessing now, the difficulties we're witnessing, is that last attempt to hold on.
Yeah.
But are you seeing anything which gives you hope that shows that maybe somewhere, some states are accepting this and modernizing with it?
It's very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
Yes and no. So I think cities have the most promise.
Okay.
Because cities are real institutions. I mean, well, they're institutions, they're abstractions, like in terms of like the city of London or like the greater London area, right? In a devolution sense. I think we're about to enter into an era of global devolution, where the city, rather than the nation state, we're moving back to like ancient Greece here, aren't we? Where the nation state like sort of devolves into city states again, because I think cities have practical. They're real. You could touch the buildings of a city, whereas like you're sort of abstracting out like where borders are, and people can argue over borders are. No, I don't think there's an argument as to whether or not Brooklyn is a part of New York City, right? There's not really a border dispute between, whether Actually, there actually is an obscure sort of border dispute between Brooklyn and Queens, and Ridgewood, but that's like a long story. That's very minutia for like only like 10,000 people really care about it. But whenever it comes to like whenever it comes to cities, like they have practical things that they have to engage with and they have to deal with. And so at the local level, especially in American and British and European politics that I've seen, cities have been able to grapple and to sort of deal with the realistic practical problems that they encounter every day.
I think America is better set up for that being a federal system.
You would think.
Well, it feels like it to me.
Yeah.
In that the structure of the US does devolve the power down to the states.
Yeah.
To some extent, not everything. Whereas here, it's something I have envy of here in the UK is that we don't have that here. There's no real devolution.
We started off devolved.
Yeah, we have a small amount of devolution with Wales and Scotland, but we don't really have this ability to move to a city or a different state and have different rules. So I actually have an envy of the US. It feels like the US is better set up for this, but maybe you don't agree.
Well, I mean, you've seen like despite being a quote unquote conservative, the Trump administrations have been very like. Through fiat and executive order, they're trying to impose federal control over academics institutions, over cities, over specific hospitals. But it's very top down, it's very direct, and it's federal. And there's skipping all of these steps and all of the sort of the federated steps that we've taken, that Americans have sort of taken for granted in terms of like the civic education sense. Like, oh, you have a city, you have a county, you have a state, you have different sections of federal government, but all that sort of been dissolving, in the last 10 or so years. And that's largely because of the reaction to this, we have to hold on to nation state control as sort of a natural devolution has been, cropping up. And so that's one of the reasons why you see, both types of, because we have a two-party system, it flips between the parties, and both are trying to use executive orders by fiat to impose policy on at the county level, at the city level, and that's not how the federal government has really ever worked, except in times of war and national crisis. So, it's a really interesting time because as we move from a valueless political system where it's about winning at all costs as opposed to like having a core value, and I think that's a reaction again to we have the ability to win now because we have the technology to influence large numbers of people and get them to change their entire culture like in 3 years. And to influence the entire culture and zeitgeist and what terms and what phrases and what symbols are allowed in society at sort of the wider level, like just by a click of a button.
So, do you believe that's broken democracy, or do you believe it's enhanced democracy?
I think it's an anti-democratic approach to a very messy kind of, it's a reaction to a very messy kind of democracy, because even though the internet is truly democratic, it has a lot of ugliness to it as well, because people are messy. People don't agree they vastly disagree on some things. And there's a messiness that comes with that. And, that's one of the reasons why early Twitter, like 2010's Twitter was so chaotic and so messy and so toxic, right? This is one of the reasons why every Discord turns into a toxic mess.
Yeah.
Because when you have flat discourse, true democracy, the early Greece kind of democracy, the forum kind of democracy, not the representational kind, is really messy.
Well, and there's social pressures now within Twitter, in that the reward structure of Twitter is such that if you cling to a group and You say the right things, you are applauded, you are celebrated, you're
But
in an in-group.
because we're searching for connection. We want
Yeah.
connection. And this is one of the things. This is actually one of the reasons why I stopped being online and stopped sort of attacking people that I disagree with, like in the online spaces, because what we really are searching for is connection.
Were you doing a lot of that?
Yeah, I think I wasn't doing a lot of that, but I think I was thinking it, and I think I was engaging in early Twitter, especially like 2017. I was I was a bit more combative, and I like being combative. But maybe I don't need to be combative to people that I don't know.
Yeah. Because you might be being combative with a bot. See, that's the other problem now.
Yeah.
There's
Large language models.
well, so they're not very good at hiding themselves at the moment. Some are.
Some are very good.
But there is some very...
It depends on the prompt.
Well, I've started to realize there's almost little point in looking at the replies. You almost want to say your point and run away. Because all of the replies...
Really?
Yeah, because I've started to notice there's a very distinct large number of AI bots now replying to tweets. And then you click on them and you can just follow them around the internet. You realize, oh, these are AI bots, but are they independent people playing around? Are they nation states trying to influence? And I think it becomes very unhealthy very quickly. Yeah. And so I've started to avoid that.
Yeah.
Don't look at the comments thing.
Yeah.
And I guess where does the AI part then play into all of this for you? Because you've lived through all of this.
Yeah.
You've been at the front line of it. You were I see it as 4 people: Julian Assange, yourself, Ross Ulbricht, and Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
Are the ones that basically exposed us to the free flow of information, the things we need to see.
I think that it showed itself, by the way.
It did.
We're just the vessels through which the power of information flows.
I think you're not giving the credit that you deserve what you did. My assumption is when you made the release, when you did the leak, when you whistleblowed, however you want to say it, you knew the risk you were taking.
I underestimated a little bit. Like I certainly thought my career was over.
You didn't think you would go to prison?
Nobody had gone to prison for a 1A issue.
Had anyone been arrested for releasing as much information as you?
No.
And you really embarrassed the government.
Yeah. Daniel Ellsberg, they threatened, but he stood outside the courthouse and he was released on bond.
You didn't imagine 35 years, I guess.
It had never happened before. I couldn't imagine what had never happened before.
But it was still huge risk. Edward Snowden was huge risk.
I was in the military and I was an intelligence analyst.
Yeah.
And I thought, I had a really cushy job at the end of that career. Like I had a nice...
Good pension.
Good pension, good future, lots of connections. I thought I had it made. I thought I was losing that. And that was enough to scare me.
Yeah. Well, I think it requires some guts and bravery. There are probably other people who faced the same decision, the opportunity to do it and didn't do it.
Yeah.
But it's now out there. But then in this period from 2010 to where we are now, we've had this huge explosion of AI, especially over the last kind of 2 years.
Yeah.
And the speed of change is crazy. How has that changed your thinking? How's your thinking adapted to this world?
It comes down actually to values.
Okay.
Right? Like there was a moment where I was just like, I'd value my time. And I mentioned that earlier, which is like, I don't want this to be, Jack Dorsey's time. I don't want this to be Jeff Bezos' time. I don't want this to be, I don't want a billionaire's like whims to govern my personal time. So I've been very selective in what I do, in what I engage with, and what I allow to consume. So I'm much more selective about how I consume information on the internet. I'm much more selective about who I communicate with. I'm much more selective about the information that I share with. Before we had this conversation, we had a sort of conversation where I was just like, I've been stepping back. I've been pulling back. But, people have been like, oh, is this for like a political reason? Oh, is this for like, are you scared or something? And it's like, no, I just value my time. I value my time. And I think we should all value our time more because somebody else values your time enormously, enough to spend billions to take a little bit of your time. So maybe my time is actually really worth something.
It is. And your time's interesting because
And I've had a lot of time taken from me, so it comes with some weight.
7 years.
8 years, including an extra
Yeah.
year.
But
I got that as a freebie.
You got that as a freebie. But your time is useful. A conversation like this, hearing your background and the decision you made, and then how you reflect on the world is very interesting because you seem to me, in a very short amount of time, you're not ideological, which is rare right now.
Well, the military is not an ideological space, or at least it wasn't in 2010. So I don't know what it is now. So,
but you must see this ideological world we've got into, this propaganda warfare. We've just spoken about it.
Yeah,
and
it works. It's effective.
But it has gravity to it. It pulls you in.
Yeah, it pulled me in for a bit.
Yeah, but as a voice with everything you've been through, you understand and what you see, and not being ideological. I think it's useful for people to hear from you.
Yeah, but I do have values.
Yeah.
But I stick to core values.
Yeah.
I don't, and I'm not really influenced by like, will people think this is cool? I say a lot of uncool things. I think a lot of uncool things. I'm kind of boring, to be honest.
That's just not true.
You know, like some of my musical tastes can be considered boring. Even though I do DJ and I do enjoy that. I'm probably not the best comedian, but I can be funny, I think.
No one dislikes my music more than anyone else. Everyone hates what I listen to. So you
give me some.
I mean, I listen to thrash and death metal.
That's kind of cool.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Do you listen to hardcore metal?
I have a very good friend of mine who is actually a labor union journalist.
Okay.
Who focuses specifically on labor activism in the States, and she's she listens to death metal, and that was her gig. That was her first gig.
She's probably cool.
Oh, very cool.
But sorry, we can talk about music. But back to the AI thing. When we talk about the internet, because the AI is just a component of the internet.
It is. It's a distillation through a neural network of weights and balances of information collected from various vetted sources and the internet.
But how do you think about that when you start thinking about the nation state? Then we've talked about the nation state not adapting or struggling with adapting to the internet.
Well, now we're going to have some time to figure that out.
Or will the AI figure out for us?
Well, it's not. So the AI, large language models, they don't think. They're just. It's a
yeah, of course,
huge game of Plinko.
But we think, or they're working towards them being able to think.
It's possible, but I think that we're missing a magic. I think we're missing some components to understanding what creates maybe either actual or the illusion of consciousness and understanding. We don't have that missing secret sauce, but like they're going to monetize. They've already tried to monetize it even without that secret sauce. So, I don't know when. I think we will figure that out in the next 20 or 30 years. I don't think it's like around the corner. But one thing that's interesting about large language models is that we've ran out of tokens to train on. We just ran out of human data.
We have?
Yeah. Like one of the problems that Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta, and various other companies is they're using the same training set data, and they're using the same training sets, but we ran out of tokens so
they've ingested everything.
They've ingested everything. So like Llama 3 is just all of the data from Llama 2 like put in several times over, like again and again, but with different variations. And there's like different distillations of like DeepSeek was created from like 3 or 4, and I suspect a 5th model and a data set that was produced by a model, and it was just it's just the amount of it's just like throwing tokens at a problem. You're essentially throwing money at a problem, taking the money out of it and throwing it back in, and sifting through it. And it does get better. There are techniques to like make it better, but like we have like the big human data that we've collected, and we add maybe little bits of it that we've recently added or that we've found, but like the big chunk of it hasn't changed since 2019. Well, the training data that was used to train GPT-3, not 3.5, not the 3.5 that was released in December 2022, but GPT-3, which is terrible in comparison to the large language models that we use now, but it was trained on the same data. It was largely the same data.
We have quite a problem in the UK at the moment with privacy. I'm not sure if you've seen recently our government has forced Apple to provide access.
Yes. Thank goodness just to iCloud, not the phones themselves.
Yeah, but it feels like there's this slow creep in the UK. I mean, the UK, we're not in great shape at the moment on a number of fronts.
Well, y'all did invent breaking into things and cracking things.
I didn't know that.
Alan Turing, the Enigma machine.
Sorry. I know.
Yeah.
Are you going to visit while you're here? That's near where I live, actually.
I've been there.
You've been? Yeah. So we live really near there. That's like 20 minutes.
I lived here for 4 years.
Whereabouts did you live?
Southwest Wales.
Oh, nice.
Pembrokeshire.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's a good part of the.
Yeah.
Good part of the Welsh people are good.
Yeah.
But we have a bit of a problem here in that the government seems to want access to everything. We now serve the government in the UK. They don't serve us anymore, and privacy.
Did they ever?
I think for a small amount of time.
Okay.
I think in the
legacy of George V.
Well, I also think under Thatcher, fully understood the power of the state, and it should be kept to a minimum. Yeah, we can argue about her policies or whatever, but she tried to keep government small. She wanted to keep government small, but we're a long way from that now. But privacy is a big problem here at the moment, and I don't think people really understand. A lot of people don't really understand or care. There'll be people who listen to this who maybe don't know your story, don't know your background, who don't know about the details of what Edward Snowden did and what happened with the NSA.
Well, I do improv classes as well.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Well, how do we reclaim this back from government?
That's a great question. It's one that I've been mostly trying to figure out. Right. One of the things that I've been I've been doing with the time that I value is I've been working on projects and on ideas and on concepts that sort of address this. In I was actually in prison still in 2016 when I was thinking about how the tools that we use to protect ourselves online are not going to be adequate going into the 2020s and the 2030s. Because of computation, the same miracle of technology that allows us to have large language models that can respond with multiple hundreds of tokens in seconds, is the same reason why it's so much easier to sift through data and to identify communications across information networks. And I recognize this having used this kind of technology myself in 2009, 2010, and and using it again in 2017, 2018, that VPNs and Tor were a great tool and are a great tool and should be used, but that it needed a little extra oomph going into the 2020s and the 2030s. And so there's this concept called a mixnet, a mixing network, which there's some debate as to what is and is not a mixing network. But and Tor tries to emulate this, but it has continuous connections. So like when the infrastructure of the internet is like there's just a bunch of computers. Some are really fast and really good, and there's some really good connections. And the ISPs, they communicate with each other, and you go from your phone to another person through like 6 or 7 different things. And the way VPN works is you go through a certain thing and it takes it out through another part of the tunnel. And so, but as it's through the tunnel, it's like protecting that information. And then the person who can't see that that it's you that's on the other side because they only see the VPN. VPN's like IP address, their identifier. And then you have Tor, which does 3 of those randomly, but they're continuous. So like you have a continuous connection and they can't see you, and it's very hard to do this thing called traffic analysis, which is to identify who's talking to who whenever you have so many hops, and whenever those hops are like deliberately obfuscated. It's an obfuscation technology to like try to prevent that communication, try to make it as anonymous as possible. But it's not enough. Computationally, it's like trivial now in the age of AI to do that. And I recognized this in like 2016 with a friend of mine who visited me in prison from MIT, who now works at Brave. And, we identified that, okay, a mixing network is what we're going to need to make specifically Secure Drop, the tool to share information with journalists securely, to make it better, to make it more secure, and to future-proof it for the computational advances that were coming. And Harry, a good friend of mine, who's in town as well, was working on this project at the same time as I was, and he reached out to me about a different thing, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm also working on this thing. Like, could you like give us like be an advisor or an auditor or whatever?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And this was like 2018. No, it was 2017, and then he formed a company based on it. I was in jail for like another year because another thing happened, a grand jury thing, and it was like a headache. But after I got out, he was just like, "Hey, you still available?" And I'm like, "I'm available now." And so I did a security audit for it, and they thought it was great. And they were like, "Hey, how would you like to? This is like one of your like you came up with the idea independently. How would you like to be a part of this project?" And I've worked alongside with NIM, as it's called, this NIM technology. And now they're launching a VPN. That's what brought me into London, as we're doing the VPN launch.
VPN tour.
Yeah. So, but it's not really it's like a VPN, but it's like a VPN with this added mixing network technology.
Yeah. It's
decentralized.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So, because
actually, the key word that I want to get across is we want distributed internet.
Yeah.
Like, we want distributed privacy, where it's not just decentralized. It's not like, oh, like only like a certain region has, or only power users have, sort of like an influence. Like, I want more distributed than that globally.
So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com. Well, I think decentralization is the most important thing people are working on. I told you about Bitcoin. Yeah. I keep my money in Bitcoin for a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is the state can't steal it from me. I use Nostr. Do you use Nostr?
I don't use any like tokens or anything like that.
I don't know if you've just seen, but Jack Dorsey.
I'm familiar with Nostr.
Yeah, because Jack Dorsey just got suspended from Twitter, which I think is ironic and hilarious.
I don't really engage with social media anymore.
Okay, well, Nostr's quite interesting. Is that it feels it's at the point before it's full of idiots and ideology and argument. It's like a very good old. I was
on Blue Sky for like 4 months.
No, they're all fighting on
before they opened it up.
Oh, okay, because they're all fighting there right now.
I don't know. I don't really engage with social media anymore.
But the Nostr thing is just interesting in that I think it's a free speech technology, and as you can't be.
What does that mean?
Well, in that you can't have your account closed either from pressure from the state or pressure from a company. Okay. So if I'm critical of Elon Musk for having a rocket deal with Turkey and banning journalists from using Twitter because Erdogan wants them off, he might then ban me.
Yeah.
I can't be stopped on Nostr because it's distributed. My account can't be closed down. So that Bitcoin, all these kind of decentralized technologies are
I
empowering.
have a question.
Yeah.
So, because like I have a slightly different opinion when it comes to platforms, because I think the platforms have rights too.
Well, because they're private companies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like I think that a platform can ban whoever they want.
I can. At least the problem is that grey area between politics and the corporation.
Yeah.
There's now certainly a grey area.
Okay.
Because Elon Musk.
This is where we're agreeing.
Yeah, no, because I mean, we all know censorship comes from government. Censorship comes from government. We don't want governments to censor. We have, unfortunately, here we have massive issues, especially with free speech. But it's the government. We want to stop government censorship, but the government censorship can come through the company. So there's a grey area where Elon Musk is now working with Donald Trump, and so there's obviously some potential political.
Yeah, and there was the argument before that the Biden administration was influencing like Meta and et cetera.
Yeah, and so I just think with the largest companies there is that grey area because there's just there is this
we
merger.
Need to find a technical solution as opposed to like a company solution.
Well, so Nostr is the technical solution to social media deplatforming, whether it comes from government or government influence. I like that. I like Bitcoin because it's decentralized. So that's why the VPN you're talking about is interesting to me, because currently I use Proton. I don't know what you think of Proton. You know them, but
yeah, I know some is NDA'd, but
so what does this VPN? Why will I sign up to this? Why am I tomorrow going?
Okay, I'll give you an answer.
Yeah,
we're not salespeople. We don't have like we're building a product. You know?
Yeah.
I had a vision. Harry had a vision. The people on this team have a vision. We're a lot of math nerds and a lot of like security weirdos. We're not very good at selling things, to be honest. Which is probably probably why you haven't heard of it, because people have been in the trenches developing a technology that works and is working, that is actually a miracle. Like there is a technology that exists today with mixed nets and with the ability to have a truly decentralized VPN and an ecosystem that supports that decentralization. That is working today. It's going to be launched, and 20 years ago this was unimaginable. Even 5 years ago, people who worked on this project didn't think it was possible. I have seen streaming video at 720p over a mixing network. I did not think that was physical. We were talking about email, whether or not we could be able to send email or download like files like long in advance over a long period of time. And now we have DSL, like late 2000s connections with a true mixed net with absolute privacy, where, obviously it depends on how secure you keep your devices, but like the communication from point A to point B, every single message that you send goes down goes to 3 different paths, and each tiny segment of that. So like thousands and thousands and thousands of segments. I mean, and it is computationally intensive, and we're trying to decrease the cost, like in terms of like energy and the cost in terms of time. Second law of thermodynamics still applies. It's actually really important whenever it comes to cryptography. But we're trying to like bypass a little bit of that to try to make it usable, because like you have to make this tech. You can have the most secure thing in the world and nobody can use it because it's so complicated and so slow. But this technology, it's working, and we want to make it available to people to be able to use. It's not as good as like a fast like VPN where you're just trying to like see something. And we have a fast mode. There is a fast mode that there's a WireGuard mode, which WireGuard is a more standard, but it's still decentralized and it's still a strong VPN with good encryption. But like if you go into mixed-net node, like okay, you won't be able to watch 4K YouTube videos. I've tried. There's a lot of buffering, but you're able to browse the internet, the rest of the internet, 100% anonymously.
It sounds so good that our government will probably try and ban it.
No comment.
That's our comment. Chelsea, I'm conscious of time. Really appreciated you giving us so much time. And what's the future for you?
The future for me,
Yeah.
values. It all comes down to values. I think what I've been witnessing in the United States over the last 3 to 4 years, especially, because I've had a lot of introspection happen in the last decade of my life. And then I started interacting with the rest of the world and really interacting with the rest of the world as it's been on fire. And I've been realizing more and more that one of the things that I think is really at the core of why there's so much fighting over minor minutia and over brands and over ideas and over concepts is that we're really looking for connection and we're really looking for values. And at one point in time, we had that through religion, we had that through the state, through nationalism. And as we've moved into sort of a more decentralized and globalized world, as that's faded, we still have that and want. We still want that fulfillment. We still want our cup, our spiritual cup, to be filled. And I don't know how we're going to do that, but one of the ways that I've been able to address that is by being very selective about the information that I consume. So I've been going to Carnegie Hall. I've been going to the Lincoln Center. I have been watching classic film. I don't really deal with this is a difference from me even 3 years ago where I was on TikTok. I don't scroll on social media anymore because I now view that as like somebody else's time that somebody has spent a lot of money to get. And so now I take that time and I go to the park, which is extremely valuable to me.
Excellent. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time. Good luck.
Thank you.
I hope we do this again sometime, but if we don't,
it's fantastic meeting you.
Yeah, and look, good luck with the VPN. I'll be checking it out. And,
all right.
Harry's a good guy, so I trust he's built something amazing. Thank you.
Well, I helped.
Well, thank you as well. I will check it out. Good luck in the rest of your trip in London.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.